Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. So, we got a quarterback controversy in Clemson or nah?
I really don't think so just yet. I know I've seen some people compare this to like a Kelly Bryant situation. And like I immediately saw people saying like DJU's go to the portal, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, geez.
I'm sorry. What? Like, what do you mean? What based on what exactly? Because that would infer that the alternative is somehow very visibly far superior to the guy that we were just seeing. You know what this is to me a little bit? And I have had trouble articulating this, but it's been bothering me since I started to see it. It's not apples to apples, okay, obviously. So let me be clear. It has Kyle Allen energy for me, and I don't love it. In the sense that, like, Kyle Allen comes in for the Panthers and, like, they win games, and all of a sudden everybody's like, Cam Newton, who's that? And it's like, I'm sorry, what?
You don't even have to go back that far. You can actually go back to it. You can go this season in the NFL because we saw this with Cooper Rush and Dak Prescott. People get caught up in the QB wins with the Z, and they just, like, their brain just glitches and they don't understand, well, there are other reasons why a team might have gone 4-1 without their franchise quarterback in Dak Prescott. And a lot of that has to do with their defense.
It's weird what those other quarterbacks have in common, but whatever.
Well, I know what you're saying. We can just spell it outright. When you got a black quarterback who's the starter and then the white wonderkin, well, then suddenly everybody wants the white backup quarterback in. I know what you're getting at. We can just spell it out bluntly. We don't have to dance around it.
Well, for me, it's just like all of a sudden whatever the guy did becomes moot, right? Like, yes, DJ had a terrible game. Like, he was not playing well. And I think that benching him was the right thing because he just appeared to be kind of spiraling.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, are we just ignoring the whole rest of the season now? Is that what we're doing?
Here's where I think this is coming from. Okay, I'm not going to dismiss what you're saying, but I do think that there's a layer here with Clemson specifically that goes back to July, and it goes all the way really back to DJ's season. I mean, I almost called him gold. Gilio and I talked to Wes Durham on Wednesday, like we typically do on the radio, and Wes had just kind of put it out there, like, hey, we owe an apology to DJ Uiagalelei. And, Gilio rightfully kind of lost it. And he's like, why? Why should we apologize to DJ? He was bad last year. It's okay to be criticized. You give DJ credit for changing his body, getting back out there, and having a really great season. I think I'd seen the stat where in his second year as starter, DJ had actually put out statistically better stats than Trevor Lawrence did in his second year as a starter, and Deshaun Watson in his second year as a starter. But there's this built-in conversation that goes all the way back to how last year went, the conversation in July at ACC kickoff about how long DJ was going to be the starter. I mean, we were speculating whether or not Cade would be the starter on October 1st against NC State. When was Dabo going to do the switch? Because we'd seen the precedent for it, right? But to DJ's credit, he's been great. And yeah, he had a bad day. And it's not like other star quarterbacks at Clemson haven't had bad days.
Well, because here's my other thing. Like, when was anybody calling for benching Devin Leary?
Right. Well, actually, Lauren.
Hear me out. Because we recognized, a lot of us, most of us, that there were other factors going on into the play. And I think that that's still true at Clemson. They finally started calling more runs. But their receivers are not getting separation, and that doesn't change no matter who the quarterback is. And I don't know why we all of a sudden just go, let's throw DJ in the trash when we give other quarterbacks reasons why they're not playing well, and we can put it in context. That is my point, and that's why I still think he's owed an apology. Just saying.
Twitter is not, and I have to stick to my talking points with this. I have to stay consistent here when it comes to sentiment on Twitter. All right, Twitter is not a real place when it comes to actual sentiment. But to your point about the Devin Leary thing, in the Florida State game before Devin Leary got hurt, there were people in my mentions talking about it's time to bench Devin Leary and see what MJ Morris had.
I'm talking about media people hinting at it, not.
Well, again, I think that gets back to the built-in conversation from, and because college football, there's some hotshot freshman that's coming through that people have been talking up. They want to see him. When you have instances like Trevor Lawrence, because we do this all the time too in across sports, because it's happened once before, well, then clearly it's going to happen again. And people are trying to build this narrative. They're trying to build this one-to-one comparison. Well, like you said at the beginning with Kelly Bryant, and it's like, you understand how special Trevor Lawrence was?
And that's I think that plays into it at Clemson as well, too, right?
Yeah.
Like, they've been, I mean, and admittedly, I think most Clemson fans would say that they've been a bit spoiled, right? Like, they've had these very special quarterbacks, in the past, decade or plus, and they have to kind of come to grips with the reality. We saw this at NC State too in recent years, where like not every single quarterback's going to be that dude. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean they still can't be good. Because remember, we thought Taj Boyd was the end all be all, and then we quickly saw a bunch of dudes kind of surpass him. And that's not to say Taj wasn't special; he was. But that's kind of what I'm getting at is you can't just have those quarterbacks don't just walk in the door.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right, and it's important to note because I didn't see Clemson's comeback in real time. Right,
I did.
Because I was over at a hockey rink, and I went back this morning and I watched it, and it's like, to me, it's if you're thinking that this is some sort of Cade Klubnik, takeover, no, he completed 2 passes. Like, let's not get crazy here, and it gets back to the run.
It makes me feel insane. I'm just like, are you serious?
Right. Will Shipley and the ground game started to pick back up. Will Shipley, overcame. I think he had a fumble along with the 3 turnovers that came over from DJ Uyunglele. So. Let's talk about how that comeback actually happened. One, Clemson's defense, and they stuck to what they knew, running the ball. And then, look, I hate to put it like this for our Syracuse friends, but I mean, they kind of gagged. Syracuse kind of gagged.
Oh no, and that's one thing I pointed out to our friend, very good friend of the Panic Room, our friend Nada, because he was saying something like. He said something about DJ, and I said, to be fair, DJ was not helped by Syracuse during his time in the game.
No.
Syracuse suddenly started helping when Cade came in.
No, Syracuse's defense is as advertised. See, I mean, honestly, Syracuse's defense is absolutely as advertised. But a couple bad penalties, and say what you want about the penalties, there was a meltdown.
Also, they ran the ball twice in the second half, and both went for double digits, and then inexplicably they didn't. I love Dino Babers. I love him. I'm happy that this is happening for him.
Yeah, incredible turnaround.
This kind of season. But I understand that a critique of him from Syracuse fans over the years has been maybe his late game management isn't ideal. There was kind of some timeout issues down the stretch, and that, sometimes just game management in general down the stretch hasn't been ideal. And I think you could definitely point to the use of Sean Tucker as part of that. But Sean Tucker was bullying when DJ Uyunglele was in the game. Like, Syracuse was getting every break and was playing amazing before DJ came out. And suddenly it was like, and Clemson's defense, I did think kind of started the momentum change, if you want to call it that. And, then things kind of got rolling for them. But Syracuse was not helping DJ like they did Cade, bless his heart.
So I know this week with Clemson, we'll wrap up the conversation about Clemson here. I understand that everything is built towards the college football playoff, and people are going to look at DJ Uyunglele's day and just chalk it up to see, this is why Clemson truly isn't a contender. And you do have the looming specter of, 3 one-loss SEC teams, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama.
And both of those things, by the way, are fair to me.
They're fair. They're fair statements to make. Although I would point out that what's today's date? It's October 23rd. There's a lot of football left, and the little scenario of Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama all having 1 loss is still far-fetched, in my opinion. And if that scenario were to play out, then Clemson probably is on the outside looking in, which is weird to me because this, again, gets back to how things are built up. We just automatically dismiss the ACC because people say so. But if Clemson were in another league, they've now played, 4? They've played, 4 top 25 matchups in the last 6 weeks? Because you have the Wake Forest win on the road. You've got NC State, followed by Florida State, followed by this game against Syracuse. I mean, these are top 25 matchups coming out of the Atlantic Division that if this were an SEC division, people would be chalking it up as the greatest division ever to play in football. But we've just assumed that that's the case. But I mean, these teams are ranked for a reason. So you have to give Clemson credit.
I agree. I think that with Clemson, part of it is and I saw some people speak to this. I think David Hale said something about this, and I kind of agree. with them, I think they've become a program that is measured based on whether or not it's likely they can win a championship, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it does make it a little different in that regard. Like, it's not fair to dismiss their resume at all, and it shouldn't be. Like, if you're talking about them for the playoff, like, I don't see why it would be dismissed at all. But, you know, and this is where they start to talk about eye tests and whatever, things like that. They get nitpicked a little more because we've seen them have teams that were maybe more special looking or more, you know what I mean? Like,
does Alabama to you? Does Alabama pass an eye test?
We agree about Alabama, yeah.
But
we are in agreement there.
So that's kind of where we're at right now, and you know, I guess maybe Dabo will finally get to learn what it's like on the other side when Nick Saban retires and Dabo eventually takes over for the Crimson Tide. Just saying, speculation. Moving on to the Coastal, which I guess on an open week for NC State fans, it was time to just tweet about the Coastal Division.
It's happened every other week.
I know. I'm kidding. But I feel, you know, there's symmetry to things. There's symmetry to the world, Lauren. And numbers have meaning. And I thought it was, I don't know, maybe something special for the beginning of the Mike Elko era that they go down to Miami and they get 8 turnovers to make good on the octolateral that happened at Wallace Wade several years ago. There's two conversations that come out of this win for Duke. One is, and they said it after the game, Riley Leonard actually said it after the game, the way they hung after losing to Miami, losing to North Carolina the way that they did, and giving up a lead the way that they did, to come back and then run Miami, as he puts it, shows the character of this group, which I think is a direct credit to the way Mike Elko has, you know, brought some new life.
I mean, I'll be honest, I was wondering, are we set up now for the Duke collapse, late season collapse? And not at all. And so, like, credit to them. And by the way, I've also seen some people saying, like, Pitt was the second best team in the Coastal. I don't think, like, why are we saying that? Based upon what? Like,
because they won it last
Tennessee
year
for a while? Like, I'm sorry that they beat West Virginia. Okay, cool. Like, they have not looked like the second best team in the Coastal in weeks. No. You know, I think Duke has more than earned that at this point. And I know it's easy to forget about Duke or whatever, but to me, that's been the case all most of the years that it's been Carolina and Duke.
Yeah, I mean, and look, Duke has been dealing with some injuries, and I never expected Duke to have a deep team, but now they're one win away from making a bowl game under Mike Elko's first season. And again, I think that's a credit to just kind of instilling some new life that was desperately needed with the Blue Devils. And Riley Leonard is. Look, the ACC's been kind of spoiled. The ACC's been spoiled with some two-way quarterbacks, and Riley Leonard has absolutely put himself in that position with the level of play. I mean, because we saw what they were able to do against North Carolina, and what they did against Miami. A lot of that is Miami getting in its own way, and some serious questions from Mario Cristobal about the state of the program and who actually wants to be around.
Why do you come in and embrace like this expectation? That's my question with any Miami head coach.
What do you mean?
Why not just be honest with the fan base? Because then they can't say you lied or anything. And just say this is going to take some time. Because like apparently now he's saying it's this big rebuilding, yada yada yada. And it's like, well, that's not what we were saying initially. Like
no, because Miami fans never want to hear that. Miami fans never want to hear it. But even though that's clearly the case, it's clearly the case. And this the question in Miami is whether or not Mario Cristobal is going to have like a massive amounts of transfer portal guys at the end of this season. So that's something to keep an eye on.
They're just really sad to watch.
No, they're pathetic. They're pathetic to watch.
It's not even funny.
No,
it's just sad.
No, that team is a huge mess, and it's once again an example of the sure thing isn't always the sure thing. And Mario Cristobal has and there's some questions as to how Mario Cristobal wants to operate at Miami. He's not exactly the most dynamic. Offensively minded coach out there, and when you got that level of talent, you can't win that way. You might have been able to win that way in the Pac-12. I'm not necessarily sure you're going to be able to do that in the ACC. I'm not sold on Cristobal. I've never been sold on Cristobal, but that's another story altogether. And I know Wake Forest fans are sitting here wondering, man, how long are you guys have been talking for 14 some odd minutes, and you haven't even mentioned Wake Forest. How dare you?
Listen, I saw it, and this is a really good point. Like, they played a sloppy-ish game for them, and they still ended that game with BC with I think it was almost 100% win expectancy.
Yeah.
And it says a lot. And I've seen Wake fans say this and I agree. It says a lot, I think, that they're not just I guess they're bowl eligible now technically, but that's not, it's become blasé at this point for them to be bowl eligible. It is not.
I know, right?
That's nothing to celebrate for them. They don't care. They have bigger goals. They're still in contention for a NY6, and I think that they've earned that based on their resume. And I think that they're going to be. They might be top 10 this week. I don't even know. They might sniff it.
Maybe. We'll see how it comes out. But you see, all these teams in the Atlantic, Lauren, are the reason why NC State just can't have nice things.
Well, and this, please understand, big sarcasm font. If Wake loses to UNC, it's just that's gonna reverse the whole thing, right? It's just that means Coastal's actually, no, it doesn't mean Coastal's actually better. I saw people saying that with Louisville and Pitt, and I was like, are you new to ACC football? I'm sorry. And also that game was disgusting.
Okay. So this again, this pops up. This mainly popped up because of, let's be real, it's popping up here because it looks like North Carolina has the inside track to win the Coastal Division in a year where NC State had a lot of expectations. Life is time is a flat circle. We're kind of doing this again, and it bothers me on two fronts. The big one being this retconning of windows that NC State has had. NC State has had windows, even last year. Okay. And it wasn't Clemson that got in your way last year. It was Wake Forest. Now, that's a layer to this that NC State fans might not really want to discuss, that Wake Forest has put themselves in a better position than they have. And if you want to make this about Dave Doran, at this point, by all means, make it about Dave Doran, because the head coach has had multiple cracks at breaking through in the Atlantic Division, and he hasn't done it for a variety of reasons. And as much as people want to get on the Clemson aspect of it, Wake Forest is actually and that's fine, but Wake Forest has actually been the bigger problem. Because Wake Forest has been the reason why you haven't had nice seasons.
Here's the thing. What have I said all year, right? Wake fans have the right to be the most mad, to me, of anyone. Because then, if they were able to have beaten Clemson, they had one big hurdle left, in my opinion, and that would have been North Carolina. And that's not because North Carolina is necessarily better than them or has a better resume. It's because of the way those teams just match up and play each other.
Yeah, that's a wild matchup.
Even if Carolina is able to beat Wake Forest, that's not going to make me say, oh, well, North Carolina's had a discernibly better season than Wake Forest. It's just a weird game for them. I'm nervous for them for that game. I'm honestly both teams, because it's going to be insane. But at the same time, it's they're the ones that can be mad. They took Clemson to the wire. They should have beat Clemson.
Should have beaten Clemson.
Okay. Yeah. They should have beaten them. And, this is they're doing what they need to do this year, and they're taking care of business. And if they get through the rest of the season and their only loss is to Clemson in a game like that, they have beef, and I understand it. But whether you're a Wake fan or a State fan talking about, you're right about what you're saying. They've had their chances in the Atlantic, NC State has, and they haven't been able to take advantage of it. Clemson wasn't a factor last year, and it didn't matter.
Right.
And, that's...
let's not forget that Wake won the Atlantic without beating Clemson.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. And that's the thing.
And that's the part that bothers me, as does the conversation.
State, this doesn't matter necessarily, but State is also under 500 against Coastal teams.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up. Because this is where we can get, and it is what it is. You can dismiss the Coastal all day, but then you have your record against the Coastal. But you can manipulate those numbers all day.
To be clear, we all recognize the Coastal is much worse this year. We all understand that.
I think our friend Austin Johnson put it best, is that he's not necessarily dismissive of the Coastal. He's just jealous. And really,
totally understandable.
Oh, totally understandable. Here's the thing that I don't think any State fan has considered. I don't think anybody in our business has considered. So I will present this to you, Lauren, and we'll close on this.
Okay.
As it relates to NC State and the Coastal Division. Two things cannot be true at once. Okay, so I present this to you. I think a lot of NC State fans have convinced themselves they cannot have nice things, right? The whole NC State stuff. You did a podcast. Jillian and I tried to do the curse reverse with the candles and everything else, right? And they're like, oh my goodness, the NC State, the universe just doesn't want to. Okay, cool. So we recognize that part. All right. So let's say that NC State, you go back in time and you go into that meeting and you swap NC State and North Carolina. Like, nope, NC State's going to be in the Coastal and Carolina's going to be in the Atlantic. Okay? All right. Coastal chaos. We're finally going to make this happen, right? Except if you believe NC State stuff to be true, if you believe that NC State cannot have nice things, who is to say that in this butterfly effect of NC State being in the Coastal, that Miami isn't Clemson? That Virginia Tech doesn't wander through the wilderness, of suck the way they had under Justin Fuente. No, honestly, I think my point is valid in that NC State stuff is so thick that it actually would cause Miami to be back for real and Virginia Tech to be good, like Wake Forest is good. And I
don't think it would happen that way. I think what you're doing is throwing an allegedly cursed team into a cursed division, a division that never
cancels out.
Happen that makes any sense. So I think even if the Coastal was exactly as we see it, I mean, I'm sorry. Like, what's to say that you wouldn't just stumble over like the rest of the Coastal does? Like, that's the thing. We've seen it every year. Nothing ever makes sense.
You're right. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We will see you all on a Thursday night. Speaking of NC State and Virginia Tech, a Coastal what could have been clash, Lauren.
Ooh.
Yes, that's going to be a gross game.
Well, I mean, State should win easily. I said should. I mean, if it's so easy, go for it. That's one of the worst teams in the Coastal. You're welcome. Right?
I'll be burning the candles just in case.
Debbie told you to put those away.
Who told me?
Debbie Yao told you to put those away.
Debbie can text me. We'll see y'all.